Hello, and welcome to another episode of This versus That, where we talk about the nutritional benefits of food, the ingredients, their nutrient labels, and whether you should be eating that food or not, or whether you should be giving it to your children or not. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about margarine and butter. Margarine and butter. My name is Ep3 This, and I'm a pediatric nutritionist. I practice clinically, but I decided to do these episodes to kind of get you to understand what it is you're actually eating and whether you should actually be eating it or not, and what are the better alternatives for you and your children. So without too much talk, let's get into these things I have in front of me.
That means you're extra
So this is margarine, creamy in color, can be solid at room temperature and stays just fine outside of the fridge. And this is butter. This is solid. I pulled this out of the fridge. As you can see, it's slightly a little bit more pale than the margarine. So let's get into exactly what is in these guys here. Before I get into like the actual nitty-gritty of it, like the nutrients, reading the labels for you and all that fun stuff, I kind of want to give you a back history on margarine and also a back history on butter, because I feel like a lot of times you get them confused. They are not the same thing, not at all. But you do need to know the difference because they contain very different makeup of things. They are used and metabolized by the body differently as well, and they also affect different cholesterol levels in the body. So you kind of want to make sure that you know the difference. So that's my job. Let me tell you what the difference is. So margarine, on one hand, is actually made out of vegetable oils. Now, the vegetable oils are usually liquid at room temperature. No matter how you whisk it, no matter how you turn it, no matter how you whip it, it's not going to become solid. So what did scientists do? They decided that, okay, why don't we hydrogenate it? Hydrogenation essentially means just adding more hydrogen to the chemical bonds and the molecular structure of a particular food or compound. So essentially that's what they did. Now, in order to hydrogenate vegetable oils, they had to apply really, really high heat to kind of make it stick. And in doing that, they were able to create solid at room temperature, hence what you have in margarine. Now, the difference between margarine and butter essentially is actually the difference in in the initial ingredient and the number of hydrogen carbons it has. Now, let's look at butter. Butter, on one hand, is actually made out of dairy. It's made out of cream and milk, which has been churned and cultured to be able to produce the thick solid that you get in butter. Butter at room temperature will actually become liquid, so it's ideal to keep it cold and keep it cold, not necessarily frozen, but keep it cold to be able to maintain that spreadable, that spreadable nature that you have when you don't want to put it on toast or pancakes or whatever the case may be. Now, butter usually contains just milk as well as the culture, and then sometimes you have salted and unsalted butter. Margarine, on the other hand, contains quite a bit of different ingredients, and we'll look into that right now. So the first ingredient is vegetable oils and fats, like I mentioned, which is about 25%. And in that constituent, that 25%, what makes it up is palm oil, palm stearin, soybean oil, and or palm oil. I think that's a bit confusing. They are not sure what is inside. Are you confused? I'm confused. There's also water. Interesting. There's an emulsifier, two actually, E471 and E476. There's also salt. There's preservatives. The preservatives here is potassium sorbate. There's citric acid. There's butter flavor. There's colorants, which is beta carotene. And if you remember in the video where I was showing you the colors and the consistency, you would see that rich yellowish orange color that you saw in the margarine. So that's the beta carotene that has been added. Then there's antioxidants, there's BHA, and there's TBHQ. We'll talk a little bit about those in a bit. Then there's vitamins. There's A, B6, B12, D, E, folic acid, and niacin. And it says here that potential allergens are the soya that's inside the margarine. Now that was a long list for something so small and so spreadable. Now let's kind of look at what is inside butter. Okay, so ingredients are pasteurized unsalted butter, which is about 82% fat. That's it. That's all that's on this. That's kind of a big difference, don't you think so? One ingredient to probably about 10 different kinds of ingredients. So the butter had one ingredient and this margarine had maybe about 10 or so. I think that's really interesting because you kind of can see the difference and how much work actually had to go into making margarine into kind of what we have today. Now, let's talk about something else in regards to these two different kinds of spreadable butters and margarine. Another thing that's important to note is that butter has high levels of saturated fats, okay? Now, saturated fats in moderate amounts are okay for the body, but you don't want them to be too much. So essentially you don't want to kind of just take a spoon, with a knife and be licking butter. No, you don't want to do that. On the other hand, margarine doesn't have as much saturated fat but does contain trans fats. Now you want to be careful about that because trans fats are a complete no for the body. They are like solid fats that go and they clog your arteries and raise your cholesterol levels. Now I'll talk about cholesterol levels in a bit, but let me just get through this segment. So with trans fats, these were things that were actually banned at some point in countries like the US and the UK because of how much damage they could do to the body. Now something else that margarine doesn't have, that butter does have, is in the saturated fats, it can actually be a really good healthy fat. So for parents who are looking to help their children gain weight, parents who are looking to improve the healthy fats in their children's diet, butter is a fantastic way to do that. And a little goes a long way. You can use butter to bake, to fry eggs. You can use butter to make pancakes. You can use butter to make cookies. And so many other things that you can use butters to do. But essentially, they are really, really good healthy fats that you can add. Now, for children who are below 1, you want to make sure that you have unsalted butter, kind of like what I have in front of me here. If you're looking for something that has a little bit more sodium in it, you can get salted butter. Margarine, on the other hand, we can't determine the level of salt or sodium that's contained in it, but we'll get into that now as I read you the nutritional labels on each pack. So it says here that the total fat in this is about 25 grams, and they are suggesting that you take about 30 grams of this, which is about 2 tablespoons. I personally think that's a lot, but I'd let you determine what's a lot for you. It's 2 tablespoons of actual margarine. That's quite a bit, so you kind of want to go easy on that. So total fat is about 25 grams, and they've broken it down. They've got trans fatty acids. This particular brand says it doesn't have any trans fat acids, so that's good. There's polyunsaturated fats, which is 0.3, and monounsaturated fats, which is about 12.5. There's no fiber. It says there's no cholesterol. Then the total sodium in here is about 1.8 grams. That's a bit on the high side, so you kind of want to take it easy because usually sodium, you kind of want it to be in milligrams. Then of course they've got the vitamins that they've also listed here as well. No sugars, no carbs, no proteins. Okay, now let's look at the butter itself. Butter on here says that the fat is about 82 grams per 100, so you can see that this has significantly more fat in here, especially the saturated fats. It says carbs is about 1 gram, and then salt is about 0.03 grams. So you can see this actually has significantly less salt. So no matter the quantity that you use, you could use, let's say, let's say like half of a teaspoon for like frying eggs, or half of a teaspoon gliding on your bread or toast or whatever, you're going to get significantly less salt in here compared to the margarine. And then proteins, it has about 0.7 grams of proteins. Do you know why? Because it's made out of dairy. Butter is made out of dairy, as I mentioned, it's made out of milk. Now, if your child has an allergy to milk, or any kind of dairy at all, then butter would not be ideal. You kind of want to move to other kinds of healthy fats and get that option into their diet. Other healthy fats include nuts, include seeds. So you have sesame seeds, you have tiger nuts, you have almonds, you have peanuts, you have cashew nuts. The list is endless. You have pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, you have chia seeds, and chia seeds have a lot of protein in them. So you can see you can get healthy fats from a lot of options if you're not getting it from butter and if you're not getting it from margarine. So I've talked about the nutritional facts and I've talked about the ingredients and all of that. Now let's get into storage. Now, as you can see from what I showed you in the video, that butter actually needs to be in the fridge. If not, it's going to be completely melted and at room temperature. Another thing is you could have margarine at room temperature. You never have to put it in the fridge. Now here's something interesting that I found out about margarine and butter. Butter does decay. Like mold will grow on it, it will go bad, it will start spoiling, it will start smelling. Margarine, on the other hand, doesn't decay. It's not going to go bad, it's not going to grow mold. If you pour water on it, water will actually sit on top of it. And if you remember in the labels that I read for this particular brand, water is one of the ingredients that is contained. So I think that's actually really, really interesting in terms of the difference in the both of them. Another thing about butter and margarine is cholesterol. Now I said I was going to talk about this and I'll explain what the types of cholesterol are, because sometimes we label them as bad or good, but your body actually produces both and you actually need both, especially for your children. You want to make sure that their cholesterol levels are just the right amount. Now, the good is called HDL, quote unquote, and the bad is called LDL. Now remember, there's no such thing as good or bad. We just need to make sure that your HDLs are higher than your LDLs, okay? Now, HDLs help you to take saturated fats and all those fats away from your heart down to the rest of your body, especially to your liver, while LDLs take all those fats all the way up into your heart, into your arteries, and that's where clogging can occur. So if you hear that somebody has high cholesterol levels, they just have LDLs higher than they have HDLs. Well, meanwhile, you kind of want it to be like this, okay? You want HDLs higher than your LDLs. Now, either one of these types, either margarine or butter, will raise your LDLs, especially saturated fats. So you want to make sure that you take all kinds of butter or margarine in reasonable quantities. And then the final thing I said I was going to talk about was to explain two things that I saw in the margarine label. And those two things that I saw on the margarine label were the antioxidants, which were TBHQ and BHA. So let's start with BHA. BHA means butylated hydroxynisole. Okay, it was a mouthful to say, but I had to get it out there. It's a chemical additive known as also that acts as an antioxidant, and essentially the goal is to prevent oxidative stress. So it prevents foods that contain iron from discoloration, as well as ensuring that the food itself doesn't go rancid. So if you read your labels a lot, you will find BHA in things like potato crisps, things that contain oils, as well as in the example that we have here today, as well as in margarine. Now, BHA is usually paired together with TBHQ, which we'll talk about a little later, but let's finish with BHA. So another thing with BHA is that in the past, it was known to be a carcinogen. Carcinogens are things that trigger cancer. Now, the problem with BHA is that there's a lot of back and forth in research. Some people are saying that it does, some people are saying that it does not. Here's the bottom line. Don't let BHA be an excess in your diet. Ensure that BHA is not something that is primarily in all the fruits that you consume, because BHA can also be found in skincare products. So if you're not eating it, you're probably rubbing it on your skin. So you want to be as close to the earth as possible with your source of antioxidants. Antioxidants you can get from fruits, you can get them from vegetables, fruits especially like berries. Berries are very, very rich in natural antioxidants. So that's that about BHA. Now let's get into TBHQ. TBHQ is also known as tertiary butyl hydroquinone. Yeah, long word, isn't it? Now, what I found, which was really, really interesting in the studies that I was reading concerning TBHQ, is the fact that they said it has a funny reputation. Imagine eating something that has a reputation, and not a reputation for great and wonderful things, but a reputation for not being so fantastic in terms of accessibility to nutrients in the body, as well as some other funny stuff that we'll talk about that actually happens with TBHQ. So TBHQ, very similar to BHA, actually also acts as an antioxidant, but compared to healthy antioxidants, they are not on the same playing field. Here's why. TBHQ as well as BHA are added to foods to preserve the oxidation and to prevent rancidity. Oxidation, especially discoloration in foods that contain iron. Now here's the catch. TBHQ can also be found in paints, can also be found in varnishes, and can also be found in skincare and makeup products. I think that's absolutely hilarious. So something that I'm supposed to be consuming can also be found in what I'm using to paint my walls or what I'm using to polish wood. Ironic, isn't it? Now the thing with TBHQ is that research has shown that it actually can cause hyperactivity and alter human behavior. Now some research studies were done on certain animals and it found that it made the animals more hyperactive based on the level of ingestion that they had. Now another thing is that children who have either ADHD, which is attention deficient, or hyperactivity disorder, as well as children who are just hyperactive, it actually heightened their hyperactivity and made them less able to focus and concentrate. So if you're kind of looking for a culprit for maybe your child is over hyperactive or can't sit still or struggling to sleep at night, TBHQ might actually be the cause. Now again, it's not just in margarine, it's in a lot of other things that we consume. So most importantly, read your labels. Make sure you're reading your labels, make sure you're understanding what those things are. Look them up. I've done my due diligence of being able to inform you about some of the things that you would find in this particular brand of margarine. Some other brands are a bit different, but again, it's just this particular item less versus this particular item in that. And that is what we have on margarine and butter. So like I always say, I'm going to leave you to make the decision for yourself what is ideally healthy for you and your family. Would it be margarine or would it be butter? That decision is up to you. My name is Ep3 This, and I'm a pediatric nutritionist, and this was another episode of This versus That. If you enjoy this episode, if you have comments, if you have thoughts, please do let me know in the comment section. I'll be looking forward to reading them, and let me know what you would like to see me do next on this show.